The storm clouds had not yet gathered in the sky, but something darker and heavier seemed to be hanging in the air that late autumn afternoon. As if the town itself was holding its breath for a moment, it could sense coming long before anyone else could. The old highway stretched silent, the wind brushing dry leaves across the cracked pavement, and the low rumble of motorcycles was the only sign of life in the distance. But even that familiar sound would soon fade beneath something far more urgent, because, just beyond the gas station on the edge of town, a little girl was running barefoot, her breath torn, her face streaked with dirt and tears, her small hands clutching nothing but air as she stumbled forward, desperate and terrified, her voice breaking as she cried out for help. At that moment, she was running not towards safety, but toward the only people she believed were strong enough to save her life. She was running toward the bikers. If you believe kindness and second chances can change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It truly supports the channel. The wind pushed against her, but she kept running, her heartbeat pounding like a drum that echoed through her trembling chest. She had no shoes, no jacket, and no plan, just the memory of that one terrifying moment when she had seen the man step through the door again, the same man she feared more than anything else in the world. She didn't stop to think. She didn't turn around. She simply ran, unsure of whether she would make it in time. And as she approached the loud sound of motorcycle engines and leather boots hitting the gravel, she felt her legs nearly give out. But she forced herself to keep going, because she recognized their jackets, their patches, the symbols she had seen the night they helped another child in town. They might have looked rough and intimidating, but in her heart, the little girl knew something others did not. These were the men who protected people like her when no one else did. Her voice cracked when she reached them, unable to form any proper sentence. She could only manage two trembling words, words that sent a sudden chill through every biker standing there. She cried, "He's coming!" Her breath came out in sharp, panicked gasps as she tried to explain, but the words dissolved into sobs. The bikers, who moments earlier were laughing, teasing one another, and enjoying a moment of peace, froze in place. Their leader, known simply as Stone, took one look at her trembling form, her scraped knees, and the terror in her eyes, and something inside him shifted instantly. This wasn't the cry of a child who had gotten lost. This wasn't tears from a simple scare. This was the raw, bone-deep panic of someone who had been running from the kind of danger that leaves scars invisible to the eyes, but unforgettable to the heart. The scene unfolded in slow motion. The bikers put down their coffee cups. Someone removed his gloves. Another straightened his jacket. And Stone bent down, his broad shadow stretching long behind him as he tried to understand what the little girl was trying to tell them. She was shaking so badly that she couldn't even catch her breath. But they didn't need details. They needed only the fear in her voice to understand what kind of situation they were dealing with. When she pointed back toward the empty road behind her, trembling and barely able to lift her arm, the bikers exchanged glances, silent, grim, decisive. Without another word, they stormed out. The roar of their engines shattered the stillness of the afternoon, echoing across the highway as they surged forward like a wall of thunder. The little girl watched them take off, her chest heaving as she tried to breathe normally again. She collapsed to her knees, exhausted from the long run and overwhelmed by the sudden relief that swept through her body. It was the first moment since everything started that she felt she wasn't alone anymore. The bikers were going after him. They were going to stop him. And she wasn't powerless anymore. But her story didn't begin at the gas station. It began in a broken home at the end of a long, forgotten street on the far side of town, a street no one visited unless they had no other choice. She lived there with her mother, a woman who once had dreams of a better life, but who had slowly, quietly, and painfully fallen under the control of a man who seemed to take pleasure in destroying every spark of hope she tried to hold on to. A little girl grew up watching her mother change from someone warm and protective to someone fearful and withdrawn, always waiting, always listening, always anxious about the man's arrival. And although the girl didn't understand everything at first, she learned quickly that fear is a language children don't need to be taught. They absorb it, breathe it, and adapt to it without ever being told what it means. The man, the one she was running from, had returned after months of disappearing. He had left them once before, promising change and pretending he cared. But when he came back the second time, his face was colder, his eyes darker, his voice sharper. The girl had been sitting on the couch, holding the frayed doll that once belonged to her mother, when she heard the door slam open. One look at her mother's face told her enough to know that something terrible was about to happen. Her mother whispered to her to stay quiet, to stay near, to not anger him in any way. But even silence wasn't enough that day. The man saw her. The man recognized the defiance in her eyes, small, but still there. And her mother's panic revealed the truth that had been hiding behind the curtains and shut doors for months. She had been planning to leave him. That was the moment when everything changed. The girl didn't fully remember how she escaped. She only remembered the shouting, the crash of something hitting the floor, her mother's cry, and then her own feet running as fast as they could while adrenaline forced her forward. She remembered stumbling through back paths, jumping over fallen branches, panting until the air burned her lungs. She ran with the desperate instinct of survival that no child should ever have to develop. She didn't know where else to go, but she remembered seeing the bikers once, months ago, when they had helped a lost boy near her school. They weren't afraid of anyone. They had power. They had presence. And in her frightened mind, they were the only ones strong enough to stop the man who was coming after them. As she waited at the gas station, trembling and terrified, she watched the direction they rode off to, praying silently that she made the right choice. She didn't know whether they would reach her home in time. She didn't know if her mother was safe. She didn't know if the man would catch up before the bikers did. But she held on to the hope that for once, the world might choose to protect her instead of turning its back on her suffering. The bikers, meanwhile, rode with a purpose that left no room for hesitation. Stone led the pack, his jaw clenched, his eyes sharp with determination. He didn't know the full story, but he knew enough. He had seen this kind of fear before. He had lived it. He had grown up watching his own mother endure the kind of pain that steals childhoods and shatters homes. He had promised himself long ago that if he ever had the chance to stop that kind of man from hurting someone else, he would do it without hesitation. When they reached the edge of the neighborhood, the streets were eerily quiet. But Stone sensed something wrong the moment they turned the corner. The front door of the small house was slightly open, swaying with the wind. There were signs of struggle, overturned furniture, shattered glass on the porch, and a small spot of blood on the steps. Stone's heart pounded as he approached the door, pushing it open wider with the back of his hand. The air inside felt heavy, thick with fear and lingering violence. He called out softly to see if anyone was inside, hoping for a response, but the silence chilled him more than any scream could. He motioned to his men to spread out and search the area. They moved quickly and quietly, checking each room, each hallway, each shadow. But the house was empty. The man had already left, and the mother was nowhere to be found. Stone clenched his fists, his breath growing tight with frustration. But then one of the bikers called out from behind the house, his voice urgent. When Stone rushed to the backyard, he found what he feared most: signs that someone had been dragged through the dirt. As he followed the track, he realized the man hadn't taken her far, just into the woods behind the property, where the trees grew dense and the shadows stretched long. The bikers moved deeper into the forest, their boots crunching over dry leaves. The sun had started to dip, casting a dull golden hue that made the branches appear like claws reaching from the sky. They followed the faint sounds of movement, twigs snapping, leaves shifting, and Stone's instincts sharpened as they approached a small clearing. He stopped suddenly, raising a hand for silence. The others froze behind him, and then they heard it, a faint, muffled cry. The cry of a woman. Stone didn't hesitate. He charged forward, bursting into the clearing like a force of nature, and what he saw made rage flare hot in his chest. The man was standing over the girl's mother, gripping her arm tightly while she struggled against him, her eyes swollen from tears, her face bruised. The moment the man saw the bikers, he panicked, loosening his grip just long enough for the mother to stumble away. Stone didn't give him a chance to run. The bikers surrounded him like a closing storm, their presence overwhelming and unrelenting. The man's arrogance evaporated instantly. He realized he wasn't in control anymore. He realized the people he underestimated were the ones who would bring him down. He tried to talk, to lie, to twist the story. But Stone had heard enough. He didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten, didn't need to. His silence was louder than any threat could ever be. By the time the mother was safely escorted away from the clearing, the man's reign of fear was over. They brought her back to the road, where the little girl was waiting anxiously at the gas station. The moment she saw her mother walking toward her, protected, safe, alive, the girl burst into tears and ran into her arms. They collapsed into each other, sobbing with relief. It was the first time in years that the girl felt the world had given her something good without taking something away in return. It was the first time she felt protected, safe, and held. And for the bikers, watching that reunion felt like a quiet reminder of why they rode, why they stood together, and why they chose to be the kind of men who protected instead of harmed. Time passed. The man was taken into custody. The mother received help. The girls started school again and slowly learned to smile without fear. And the bikers? They remained nearby, not hovering, not intruding, but always present enough to make sure the darkness never returned to her doorstep. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more life-changing stories to the world. Before you go, please comment below what part of the story moved you the most. Thank you for watching.